If you ask 10 masters, you will get 10 different opinions because this is an art. It's not just a science. There can be scientific elements involved, but it's mostly art, and you've got to use heart for that, and you've got to use experience. Hey, for Play and Trade Guitars, I'm John. That's Zach behind the camera, and this is Play and Trade Guitars, where we play it and trade it. We've covered a lot of territory on this channel, and I'll tell you what happened the other night. We got to go to the Chicago Music Exchange and see Paul Reed Smith live. He gave a live clinic at CME to a packed house, and he shared some thoughts that go beyond just the purely technical mechanics of building guitars and gets into what I would call the heart of guitar playing. And what I want to do today is I want to do a bit of a reaction, and I want to kind of go into the heart and soul of what it is to participate in music, to be part of this kind of, I can't avoid this word, the mystical experience of participating in music, particularly in my case, in your case, through the guitar. The guitar is the type of instrument that can transcend your very everyday life and put you in touch with a direct mystical experience of something bigger than yourself. Whatever you believe in, whatever you want to call that, it's there for the immediate taking. And what's incredible about that is at the end of the day, no matter whether it's an acoustic or an electric guitar, you have a vibrating string. And the sound that you're going to get out of a guitar is going to come in how you manipulate that vibrating string. And a string can vibrate in a beautiful manner, it can vibrate in an ugly manner, and there's all sorts of in between. And that presents an entire palette of sounds, which are not all right or wrong. You can strike the string down near the bridge for a super trebly sound. You can make it much more mellow and smooth and warm by plucking a little higher up. And even when we move to an electric guitar and think about where you place the pickups, and when you think about the way that they build guitars, this is the basic argument that Paul Reed Smith addressed in his discussion on TONEWOODS. TONEWOODS is a hot topic, right? His premise was basically what he is facing the backlash from the internet on, is the idea that for a solid body electric guitar, the only thing that matters is essentially the pickups, picking up the vibrating strings, that going through a cable into an amp, and essentially that the wood makes next to no difference when it comes to the sound of the guitar. And I could tell you this, that on the surface, I am going to be the kind of person who tells you that I think that that is absolutely an absurd argument. I do not buy the premise that the wood in a guitar, tone wood so to speak, has no relation at all to the sound. And I'm going to give you a few reasons why I really have thought about this. And from a player standpoint, why I think people are really missing the mark and actually robbing themselves of the joy and the gift of what it is to live in our day and age. We're like not even 100 years removed from the time that a solid body electric guitar was invented. The sound that you get out of any guitar is going to come down to your interaction with that guitar. Yes, it's plugged in to an amplifier, but the beauty of a way that a string can vibrate is so complex. And what factors into the way that that string vibrates, and all the ways that you can manipulate the way that that string vibrates, apart from just the signal path, there are 10,000 ways that you can manipulate the way that that string moves. And I'm not going to pretend for a second that the wood is not a part of that equation. And I'm also going to argue that the wood is an important part of that equation. And I'll grab two other guitars that, to me, like the first thing I kind of woke up and thought to myself as I was kind of thinking about all this, if you want the simplest explanation for why it matters in a quote-unquote solid body electric guitar, it's how different these two guitars sound. Now, according to the argument that tone woods don't matter, these Les Pauls really don't have any business sounding any different. And yet, here you are with a Les Paul ES that sounds completely different than a solid body Les Paul. And that's completely based on the construction of the woods. So to dismiss the idea that the woods have no input into the sound of the electric is just silly. And this is one of the biggest ways to differentiate the way that that string is going to vibrate. There's a resonance going on with the guitar body itself that is affecting the way that that guitar string vibrates, that is feeding into that overall summation, some of it which is beyond just your brain or an audio graph or a scientific chart. And if that's the way that you want to approach guitar playing, I just feel sorry for you, because you get to be part of something way bigger that is so beyond us and so essentially magic. And if you don't think it's beyond science what happens when you play guitar, you're not playing enough guitar, and I hope you keep playing to get to that point. But this guitar right here is one of my best arguments for why the wood of a guitar matters. If you've played an ES Les Paul, it does not sound like a solid body guitar. And one of the things that Paul, I think, was dismissed on in some of the arguments against him and the importance of tone wood is that tone woods only matter on an acoustic guitar. And I can tell you the way that I shop for a guitar for years, if I go into a guitar store like Chicago Music Exchange, if you give me 10 Les Pauls, this is another, I think, key point here, they all sound different. And if the idea is that the woods themselves don't matter, they should all sound the same, right? If you get all the pickup heights exactly the same across 10 Les Pauls, you get everything, you know, bridge, saddle height, everything, truss rod adjustment down to being the same. I'm going to tell you right now, those 10 Les Pauls do not sound the same. So what accounts for the difference? Same signal chain, except the woods, right? And I think the biggest way that you can feel it, and the way that I still shop for guitars, is unplugged. If I'm going to line up 10 Les Pauls, I will sit for an hour and play them unplugged before I even find the 2 or 3 that I'm even interested in plugging into an amplifier. And we don't even need to acknowledge the importance of the actual amplifier in the sound of an electric guitar player's sound overall. But what I'm talking about is that thing that, whether you can put it in an audiograph or audio spectrum analyzer or not, if you go and use your experience to play 10 of the same model of guitar, they're all going to vibrate differently. Some of them will have kind of what I would describe as like a waterlogged feeling, where it's like, it's dense. It doesn't want to let the notes sing. And what I'm really interested in, especially from years of playing acoustic guitar, which I can tell you directly translated into the way I play electric guitar, and the sound that comes out of the electric guitar, I promise that, is the way that you can make a note sing. Part of that is in your hands, part of that is in the instrument itself, because some electric guitars are just more prone, through probably their overall body resonance, to allowing the sound to kick out at you. And that's part of the magic. I mean, I've always felt like the best way to find your forever guitars, your life guitars that you're going to keep forever, you just got to play them and you feel it immediately. To me, the dead giveaway is before I ever plug it in, there's a certain beautiful resonance that I can feel in my left hand. And it's just something that if you were to see it visually, if you were to make some kind of beautiful shape out of what you're feeling in terms of that vibration, it would probably translate beautifully visually. You would just see something that probably led strength to the overall kind of nodes of the sound itself across these vibrating strings that just kicks sound out differently. And I feel like the wood is a huge part of that. Now let's talk about price, because I feel like a lot of the argument is calling them, you know, calling somebody like Paul Reed Smith crazy because he's trying to charge you more money for a guitar because of the wood. Here's the thing. Again, you're participating in a culture of guitar less than 100 years removed from the source of electric guitars, and you've got true craftspeople that care about the guitars that they're building, and you are going to put them down because they're going out of their way to make, as craftspeople, true works of art that beyond just the functional application of, you know, screwing a couple pickups to a deck of wood, you're not going to give them credit as craftspeople and artists for the way that they put the wood configurations together. It's a miracle that you can take something that grows out of the ground, sculpt it through a craft that takes decades upon decades to learn. Most can't do it well, and amongst the few that do it great, few care, I would argue, as much as Paul Reed Smith. And you can see it. How many guitar companies do you have in the big 3 or 4 where the founder is still involved? It's basically Paul Reed Smith. His name is on the guitar, and I'll tell you what, I'll show you another one of my guitars. I'd say before I started playing trade, the brand that I honestly had the least experience with was Paul Reed Smith. And part of that is because growing up, it's true, Paul Reed Smith guitars are expensive, and they can be out of reach, particularly for young players growing up. There's no doubt about that. But if you get in the point of your life where you can experience a Paul Reed Smith guitar, say a core level model, let alone a private stock or 10 top or any of these, if you get to the point, why would you want somebody to diminish the experience or the inherent experience you have with that beautifully crafted instrument, which is not only an instrument that sounds great, but is a piece of art and part of our culture? I mean, if it was true that you just wanted to craft guitars as slabs of wood with pickups and you have no romantic notion whatsoever about the idea of a wooden electric guitar and what it does to the tone, then we can just shut down all the American guitar manufacturers, move everything overseas and make them out of cardboard or concrete or whatever you want to make them out of. And it's just the least imaginative, saddest idea I can possibly think of for this electric guitar world that we all want to participate in. And if you want proof that Paul Reed Smith cares, this guitar is like $700. This is a DGT SE that we reviewed on Play and Trade Guitars. And as I learned more and more about Paul Reed Smith, as we did our PRS buyer's guide, as we reviewed models from the SE line, you know, I'm talking $500, $600 guitars, up to core level models. This guitar I bring on stage because it's got the magic. But not only does it have the magic, that indescribable thing that you pick up a guitar 1 out of 100 that just have that thing, this has it. And sorry, I can't show you a visual audio graph or any kind of scientific chart that's going to prove that to you. But if you don't use your experience to verify that for yourself, you're going to miss out on this gift of life, which is every now and then you come across a magic guitar. And this one, immediately I knew I had to keep it, because this is my proof right here that he cares. This is a $700 guitar that plays as well or better than many of the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 guitars that I've played from you name it brand. And I, you know, in this case, put my money where my mouth is. I had to own it, and I play it on stage. You don't want to spend $10,000, $12,000 on a private stock? Go spend $700 on an SE, and I promise it'll blow away from a construction standpoint, from a quality standpoint, pretty much anything else you're going to find under $1,000. And my job here is to go in with a completely open mind and put the guitars on the bench, pull them apart, right? I play them. I give them all a fair shake. And by the way, nobody has any input on which guitars we choose to review or what I say about them. And I will tell you the things that I think make differences in electric guitars. After doing this, as long as we've been doing and reviewing all the guitars we've done, when I was in Spain studying, a Spanish guitar builder told me that the 2 most important points on a guitar, now bear in mind this is, yes, a Spanish style, you know, classical guitar, but it still translates to guitar, and you can see how much it affects the sound. He said the nut and the bridge, because you have strings under immense tension, and the 2 contact points with the guitar body itself are going to be the nut, essentially, and the saddles. And let's talk about an electric guitar. Obviously, the thing now that's going to start to color the vibration of that string under tension is going to be the nut material. A bone nut is going to sound different than a nylon nut, is going to sound different than a brass nut. Trust me, if you have not heard a brass nut compared to a bone nut, you'll hear the difference. And what's happening? You're affecting in some summated way the vibration of that string. Same thing, the other contact point, the saddles. If I flip this from a Tele string through body, you know, to a Strat style trem block, to a Floyd Rose, that contact point is also going to affect the sound of that vibrating string and the way in which the string vibrates. The reason the string sounds different when you pick it low versus high is because from a scientific standpoint, the audio nodes of that vibrating string are being accented. Basically, the harmonics you're hearing are being accented in different registers depending on where you pick. So if you can believe scientifically that such a thing is possible to alter the audio nodes of a vibrating string, and you can hear obviously how much something like the nut material or the saddle material makes a difference in the sound, it's not a stretch of the imagination to say, okay, that's the nut and the saddle, what about the wood itself? And the clearest way to me to hear that is start to go from solid body to semi-hollow, start to go from semi-hollow to jazz box, and they sound totally different. And yet, what happens then to the argument that is just about a vibrating metal string through a magnetic pickup going out to the amp? It just falls so far in its face, and I trust that anybody who actually plays guitar, who you tell that to, would probably not even entertain the argument, because it's so silly, it's so nonsensical. And when you play guitar, as maybe hippy-dippy as this sounds, it's true. You are communing with the actual vibrational energy of an instrument. That vibration happens to be translated through magnetic pickups and electric guitar, but the quality of the vibration of that string, whether harsh, mellow, beautiful, edgy, however you choose to affect the vibration of that string, it's coming through in such a way because of the sum total of all the components, including the wood. Another great example I can give you These are two tellies I play at shows all the time. They sound different. They both have single coil pickups. But in this case, yes, I do have brass saddles on this one compared to the 6 saddles on here. But one point I want to make, regardless, is that this has a rosewood fretboard, and this has a maple fretboard, and then there's guitars with ebony fretboards. And I promise you I can hear the difference when I play an ebony fretboard Les Paul versus a rosewood Les Paul, even versus a Powell Ferro. I can hear that, I can feel it. And if you can't hear that or feel it, or if you believe that if you play the guitar through an audio spectrograph, that you're not going to see any difference, you're looking at the wrong tool. You're basically giving all your trust, instead of your own experience, you are giving your trust, using your brain instead of your heart, to a scientific instrument which may or may not be capturing the thing that you're trying to measure anyways. I mean, it's like, to say you have a cupcake, right? The cupcake is mostly the cake, and then there's the frosting on it. And how do you separate the frosting from the cupcake? Is it still a cupcake without the frosting? Sure, but it's all part of the whole package. But to knock a guitar builder because they are trying to go out of their way to find the most choice materials for building a guitar and dedicate their life to finding the couple of percentage points difference between those TONEWOODS, one amongst the other, it does matter. And it's almost like someone going to a bourbon maker and saying, oh, it all tastes like bourbon to me. To me, that's how silly you sound. It's like, oh, all red wine tastes the same. All bourbon tastes the same. Oh, all whatever tastes the same, feels the same. And somehow assuming that because you, I guess, either saw something on the internet or you don't have experience with it yourself, that if you can't read a one-line fact to verify it one way or another, that it's just nonsense. And that's where it just falls on its face, because people like Paul, people like Leo Fender, people like any of these people in history, Ted McCarty, understood that woods were a big part of it. So I'm gonna declare that I always approach these demos and these reviews from a positive standpoint, but I am absolutely, without a doubt, on Paul's side when it comes to those who say tonewood does not matter to an electric guitar. They are completely robbing themselves of the experience, the joyful experience of playing guitar. And you don't have to spend $10,000 on one of Paul's guitars. You can spend $700. You can spend $200 on something. We've reviewed Squires that sound absolutely phenomenal. So I'm not talking about needing to spend a lot of money, but don't pretend for a second that the wood in a guitar doesn't matter. It's just simply not true. So I think when you take the idea that affecting the vibrating string is what you're doing when you play, the thickness of the pick is going to matter. Where you pick along the string in relation to the bridge is going to matter. How hard you hit the string is going to matter. If you feel the string and release it versus slapping at it is going to matter. And you're all affecting the vibrational quality of that. So when you add in the saddles, the nut, the tuners, if it's chambered, if it's semi-hollow, the wood itself, if it's string through body, which I believe makes a big difference on a Telecaster, this right here, string through a slab of wood, is affecting the quality of the tone. And if you can't hear that or feel that, particularly unplugged, or if you think it doesn't matter what a guitar sounds like unplugged, you got to keep playing and you got to keep experiencing. I don't know Paul Reed Smith personally at all. I shook his hand at the CME event. I thought his entire delivery was so captivating. I thought everything he had to say was so great. It reminded me of, I was studying with Pepe Romero in Spain, and he was giving a clinic where rather than really play much, I feel like when you go to master classes, what you're going to find a lot of the time is rather than play a lot, they end up talking for like an hour. And I remember some of the younger students in the master class saying, like, what is this? I don't want to hear all this. I want to be told, what I want to be taught exercises. You can get that anywhere. That's the thing. You can get that anywhere. You know the work. If you're serious about playing the guitar, you know the work that you need to do. And it should be the work that you want to do to get the sound that you want in the setting that you want. But at the level of a master like Paul Reed Smith, it reminded me a lot in the clinic at Chicago Music Exchange. It took me back to Spain listening to Pepe Romero talk about the art of, sitting on a concert stage with an acoustic guitar in this instance, but throwing sound to the back of the stage. And really just explaining that, for example, you have to feel the string and release it. It's like throwing arrows of sound to the back of the stage. That's an acoustic guitar. I can promise you that that translated for me in the way that I pick an electric guitar string. If you pick an electric guitar string too forcefully, or you pick it ugly, there is such a thing as picking ugly, you get an ugly tone. If you pick that string with a release to throw that sound to the audience, it'll happen. And if you don't think that that's related to the way you play an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar behaves just as much like an acoustic guitar because it is a guitar. And even though it's electromagnetic capturing of vibrating metal strings, it's the beauty of that vibrating string that we're after. It's the way that that string vibrates that we are manipulating and using as guitar players and as musicians, more importantly. Sometimes from the head, but more importantly to me, from the heart, combining both of those and throwing sound out to an audience, whether it's in a live performance or a recording. It's this higher level stuff that when you tap into with your own experience, your own heart, it's gonna take you way, way further. And that's where I felt like I was back in Spain listening to Paul Reed Smith, master of his craft, absolute American master of his craft, at Chicago Music Exchange, giving that high level advice that frankly, people on the internet just reveal themselves to not be ready for. They reveal themselves as so dense and dull and unable to have the imagination, the patience, the creativity, or the sense to sit with what is being said to them from a master and take away something positive and useful. It's so easy to be negative in the world. And if you can't take something like a 2-hour clinic from Paul Reed Smith speaking in the same room as you and find something that is rewarding to you personally or valuable to you as a guitar player or guitar builder, you're robbing yourself of that experience. My only intention in sharing the PRS clinic was to celebrate the PRS clinic as something inspiring. Zach and I were there. Everybody in that room was inspired by what Paul had to say. If you have valid criticisms, if you want to come at us and say that TONEWOODS don't matter because X, Y, and Z, and you want to actually talk about it, that's another story. I can tell you from personal experience, to me, TONEWOODS matter. And even if you try to tell me that that's a placebo effect, the mystical connection of me as a guitar player to a guitar making music is the sum total of everything physical, mental, spiritual going on at the same time to kick that sound out to an audience. And whatever inspires me in my head and whatever I want to spend my money on, don't put other people down for what inspires them, and let the proof be in the pudding when you hear them play. And if you're not putting in the time to play, but instead you're hitting the negative comments in a YouTube video, we don't want that. I'd rather you just get lost, honestly. And so that's where I say, thanks to all of you who are always supportive. Thanks to those of you who are positive. We strive to keep this positive. Let me know what you think about TONEWOODS. I'm telling you, I'm a believer in the importance. It may not be the most important thing, but don't for a second try to tell me that it doesn't matter, because it's just, again, as Paul said, use your own experience, be your own judge. Keep making music, stay inspired. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video from Playing Trade Guitars. Keep it positive, keep it real, and thanks for hanging with us. I'm John, that's Zach. See you on the next video.